Okay, we are live.
Thank you. I would now like to call the workshop for Wednesday, May 5th, 2021 to order. We are convened as of 4:32 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. I would respectfully ask everyone in the meeting to ensure that your phones are muted and that your ringers are set to silent. Directors and members of the staff, for the sake of the record, if you would like to be acknowledged during tonight's proceedings, I'm going to ask you to please raise your virtual hand and wait for me to call on you before proceeding to speak. Speaking out of turn will only add confusion to the record and to the proceedings. For any directors or staff participating by phone, remember that you can indicate that you would like to speak by pressing *9 and to toggle your setting on the phone and then press *6. As is our custom, I'll begin this meeting with a brief safety moment. The Denver Department of Public Health and Environment says that as of May 1, 2021, over 40% of adults in the Denver metro area have been fully vaccinated, and 55% have received their first dose. As more and more people become fully vaccinated, many are wondering when life will return to normal. But before you throw away your face masks and huddle together, experts are warning that we'll need to continue wearing face coverings and physical distancing a while longer, especially indoor public settings. So while the recent public health orders in Colorado in CDC guidance require the use of face coverings in indoor public settings, face coverings are no longer required outdoors in some cases. Indoors with other vaccinated individuals, but don't let the guard down too soon. The Transit Security Administration, the TSA, has just extended the federal mask requirement for public transportation until September 13th, 2021. The federal mask requirement states that individuals must wear a face covering while waiting for and while riding public transportation to include airports and aircraft, train stations and trains, bus stops and buses. RTD requires that employees and customers continue to wear face coverings, and RTD is taking a cautious approach to returning to pre-pandemic operation practices to ensure that the safety of our employees and our customers. Transit continues to be extremely safe way to travel, and there have been no cluster of positive cases linked to transit in the Denver metro area. So consider getting vaccinated if you've not done so already. Wear your face coverings, practice physical distancing, and continue good hygiene practices, and we will end this pandemic sooner rather than later. So let me go to tonight's agenda. This evening, we will be discussing the agency's strategic planning efforts that are currently underway. Our General Manager and CEO, Deborah Johnson, will be presenting along with individuals from TransPro, the strategic planning consultancy group, selected as a result of an intensive procurement process. TransPro is an industry leader in strategic planning for transportation agencies and transit systems, and the credentials of their team are certainly impressive. Following the presentation, the board will have an opportunity to ask questions of the general manager and the consultants. With that, I would like to invite our general manager, Johnson, to introduce TransPro. General manager.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and to all who are virtually assembled. I'm Deborah Johnson, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer here at the Regional Transportation District. TransPro is a national thought leader in strategic planning and performance management. And as you indicated, Madam Chair, they were selected through a competitive solicitation process to help us as it relates to planning and creating alignment and ensuring that we're all looking toward the same North Star after a competitive process. With that as a backdrop, I want to clarify that this evening I am going to be a listener, and this is really about you all engaging with TransPro. So at this juncture, I will yield the floor, but first I will introduce Mark Ash with TransPro, as well as Aaron Bingaman You guys are in great hands, and I will be a fly on the wall and assist as appropriate. With that, I will yield the floor to my strategic planning partner. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Ash, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam General Manager. I think I've had the pleasure to speak with many members of the board. My name is Mark Ash. I'm the CEO of Transpro Consulting. I've got Aaron Bingaman with me. Aaron, if you'll give a wave. Aaron is one of the principals on our team and is actually leading this engagement. You find him actually sitting in Denver this evening. We were working with members of your team even today. Amanda Skeen, who is on our team, Amanda, give a wave. You find Amanda sitting in Brooklyn, New York this evening. And so you'll be hearing from both of my colleagues. Just a quick further intro on us. While we get the chance to work with many of the mega systems globally, the Londons and the New South Wales and some of the larger systems, New York City, et cetera, we really take probably most energy in working with many of the larger North American systems, the Charlottes of the world and the Austins, and certainly folks like yourself, being able to work with board members, CEOs, and general managers, aligning around what success looks like, and then building their organization and their board governance structure to be able to deliver precisely those outcomes that they're so passionate about. The beautiful part is it's unique to every community. Never do you wind up with the same answer. And I think some of what Aaron and Amanda are going to share with you this evening shows the uniqueness of the process that your management team has been engaged in over the course of the last 6 or 8 weeks. So with that, I too will be quiet and turn to my colleague Aaron to kind of kick things off this evening. Aaron.
Well, good afternoon, Mark. Thanks for that introduction. CEO Johnson, thank you for that. Madam Chair and the entire board, it's great to be with you. I'm going to confess here that my Zoom screen has frozen a little bit, so I'm flying a little bit blind, but I have a good sense of what we'll be working with you on, and hopefully my screen refreshes in the meantime. Amanda, if you would please go ahead and share your screen and bring up our deck that we'll work through and advance to the agenda. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you. Experiences like this give us energy. We love the public sector. We love public transportation. Mark and I have both had the opportunity to lead agencies in our careers, and just the privilege and opportunity we have, we're excited about that. We pretty much worked through welcome and introductions, but as you look at our agenda, quite a bit of ground to cover. We want to talk with you a little bit about the success planning process and the overview that we've been going through. Share with you work our general manager, CEO, and senior leadership team have been developing and talking through some thoughts on mission and vision. We will take a break. I think we have 4 hours budgeted on the meeting invite. That is certainly not a challenge for us to try and meet that 4 hours. I think we can, get this done tonight in a reasonable amount of time. We'll talk a little bit about outcomes and activities, discuss planning for the board retreat in June, wrap up, talk about next steps, and close the session. Amanda, why don't you take us to the next slide? Hopefully everybody's seeing what I'm seeing, and you see 4 multicolored circles on your screen. One of the things that we really do and to simplify the process.
Now your voice has gone away with your video there.
Did we lose Aaron altogether? It sounds like we did.
It seems so.
Well, why don't I do my best, Aaron, until we get his video back up again. The good news is he is in Denver, so we may have him walk around to each of your locations, and he can brief from there.
Oh, sure.
Hey, Mark, maybe we ought to concentrate on better broadband service in Colorado and leave RTD alone. Kind of grumpy today, sorry.
We'll get an accountability committee for broadband. Well said. So I'll pick up, and Aaron, please just let us know once you get back in, and I'll turn the microphone back to you. The framework that Aaron was about to speak to that we employ in building strategic plans is built around really 4 key prisms: why, what, how, and who. And in each of those prisms, I'm going to spend a second and kind of set them up for you, because we're going to spend the evening pulling into each of these 4. The why, which is where we'll start with you this evening, really goes to that inner passion. It's the, why are we doing this? So, I mean, you're all gathered here on a Wednesday evening. Why? Why are there buses? Why are there trains? Why does RTD exist? It's mission, vision, and values of the organization, how we engage with one another as professionals. The what speaks to specifically the strategic outcomes, and you're going to hear us use that word about 700 times tonight, the strategic outcomes that we care about in the pursuit of our vision. So it's relatively easy to draft a vision. There's some pushing and pulling. We're going to share with you a draft this evening that the management team has very thoughtfully articulated. But the second question becomes, all right, if that is our vision, identify for me specifically and quantifiably what success looks like related to the pursuit of that vision. Now, I'm going to take you to the bottom of the slide. This is where the board really lives. This is where the board lives in establishing the why, the inner passion, and then articulating with your CEO or your general manager specifically the outcomes as a board that you expect to be able to receive based upon the work that she and her management team will execute. The board lives on the left-hand side of the slide, whereas on the right-hand slide, once the board and the management team have identified what success looks like, it now becomes the general manager's responsibility to figure out, how am I going to make that happen? What are the work actions that I'll take? What is the budget that's necessary to be able to deliver that? Who are the professionals that I need to be able to execute? And then finally, once she has developed her work plan to deliver success in the pursuit of the organizational vision, the last step is identifying who she needs on her team, the personalities, the structure, the KPIs that she will manage the organization against, all designed to produce the outcomes which the board is holding the CEO responsible for. Why we exist, the passion that gets us up, mission and vision, what success looks like related to that, the outcomes which the board will hold the general manager responsible for executing. Now we turn things over to the CEO. She develops the work plan as to how this is where the activities are, the actions of the organization. And then finally, the who. That's where the CEO develops the team that's necessary to be able to execute. Any vision of Aaron coming back to us, or shall I carry on and play my best Aaron? Looks like no Aaron. I'll keep going.
No, Aaron.
So, Madam Chair, as I continue to play my best Aaron, there are 4 key questions that we would invite the board to begin to reflect on, and sets up really the balance of our evening together. The first is, how do the board and general manager define what success looks like? And so we'll spend some time with that this evening, and you'll notice the way we phrase the sentence, it's how do the board and general manager define what success looks like? Clearly, the authority lives with the board. However, in a high-functioning organization like yourselves, you think about allowing your professional executive, which you've hired, to actually provide you with best thinking in regards to those outcomes, and the board responds to that. It is a management-led, general manager-led, and board-endorsed process. The second question, which you can see in front of you, is how do we get the board chair specifically on behalf of the board and the general manager to align around that adopted definition of what success looks like. Those are the two individuals that are really at the tip of the spear. The chair on behalf of the board, the general manager on behalf of the management team. Those two have to have specific alignment in regards to that adopted definition of success. Now, no board, Madam Chair, is going to simply align around a definition of success and then wait for the general manager to come back at the end of the year and tell you whether or not they've been successful. We need a way to be able to track and monitor, typically on a quarterly basis, to the discussion we were just having, on a quarterly basis, what are the metrics, the KPIs that the manager, the general manager, and the board will monitor to ensure that the management team is on track to be successful. You want to be able to see as a board, we've articulated what success looks like. How is the general manager doing against that? Again, specific, quantifiable metrics. And then finally, the fourth question is, how does the board go about empowering the general manager and the management team which she has engaged to go about executing the activities? The general manager is responsible for the activities, while the board holds the general manager responsible for the outcomes which those activities produce. I will carry on unless we have seen a sign of Aaron returning.
I am here. You all have missed a terrific presentation that I was giving apparently to myself for a solid 7 or 8 minutes. So my apologies for dropping off and reappearing. I'm sure Mark has done a fine job. And as Mark has shared, this sets the stage for building our blueprint for success, where we see the board obviously focusing on our outcomes, focusing on assuring that our team is achieving the mission and vision and fulfilling our vision of success, built upon the tactics, the plans that our team is implementing and driving with the general manager and the senior leadership team, really focused on the how and the who. Thanks for jumping in there, Mark. When we have an outcome-based process, we develop our budget accordingly and a little bit different. So if you look at the traditional model of building a budget and an organization, right, we start with the resources we have and we ask ourselves, what can we do? And then align our employees around that. When we have a clear definition of success, when we have clarity around where we're going and how we're going to get there, when we build that plan to deliver those outcomes, then we can make priority decisions, we can make investment decisions that align with and assure we're making investments at a community level, at an organizational level, around accomplishing those outcomes that we've agreed to as an organization. We build in that accountability systems and information systems to make sure that on a quarterly basis, we're making progress towards the outcomes that we've defined together and assuring then that our employees' performance and outcomes are in alignment and driving towards that. We manage performance to make sure that the things that we are doing are actually accomplishing the outcomes we set out to desire, and allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission and the flexibility to say, gee, we said we want to be great here. We've been doing X, Y, and Z. Turns out Y isn't helping us make that accomplished. Let's do something different. Let's think differently about that, and tying it back to those outcomes that we've agreed to and have focused on as success. And then making sure that performance is recognized at the employee level on the outcome basis. Next slide there. We started on the ground floor. We went through some exercises with our senior leadership team to take a look at our mission and our vision, asking ourselves from our previous mission, from our current mission and our current vision, are these still relevant? Are these the things that we're doing? Do these align with why we get out of bed every day to do what we do? Next slide. And keep going here. One of the exercises that we did, if folks are familiar with the book Start With Why, Simon Sinek, we showed a video clip of a TED Talk that he has done. It's a really encouraging and challenging book, and that it challenges organizations to really think about why they do what they do. And if we could summarize the statement of both the clip and the book, that the reality is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. You think about the organizations, the companies, the businesses that we admire, public and private, that there's a real meaning around the why of what they do. And that the what they do happens to be, so think about Apple computers, for example, pretty much admirable, right? Their mission is to change the world. It just so happens that they make computers, right? So it's thinking about our mission as an organization and defining, you all ran for office, right? There's plenty of things you could be doing tonight. You're serving your community in this capacity. It wasn't just to run buses and trains, right? There's some deeper meaning behind why you do it, right? In discussing that, we also worked with the leadership team to, hear them out, hear their personal stories around their whys. Go ahead, Amanda. And so a mission is about why we exist. A vision is about what we strive for. So we're going to take you through some sample mission statements that we looked at from organizations and companies you might recognize from around the world. Uber, their mission statement is, we ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. The next one. Lyft, improve people's lives with the world's best transportation. TransDev is empowering freedom to move for everyone, every day. And this is the RTA in Cleveland. You think about our Simon Sinek mission. They just recently updated their mission statement, right? And if you take a look at their mission statement before, to provide safe, reliable, clean, and courteous public transportation, that's what they do, right? Well, when we sat with them and had the conversations with them, why they do it, they were really about connecting the community. And in a conversation with our leadership team and the CEO and thinking about how do we frame our why, Amanda, our current mission of why is stated as meet our constituents' present and future public transit needs by providing safe, clean, reliable, courteous, accessible, and cost-effective service throughout the district. It's a fine statement, but it really talks about what we do. Does it talk about why we do it? And so we've proposed a draft mission on the why here, and in really thinking about why do we get up out of bed? Why do we do this? Why are we committed to this service? Fundamentally, the leadership team came around to, we make lives better. This idea of making people's lives better and letting them define what better might mean is certainly a thought process around what we've done with the working mission. Amanda, I think we got let's go to the next slide here, and I see a hand raised, so this is a good time. So I want to pause here on this working draft of a revised mission statement by making lives better. And what would you invite the general manager and senior leadership team to reflect on regarding this working mission statement? And I see Ms. Williams, your hand is up.
Hi, so I went to the RTD website, and what is on the RTD website is not the same. Under our mission, it says, as a public agency, we are dedicated to serve the public and to meet the public needs for a transit agency. We connect you with your community safely, on time, and in clean and accessible vehicles. We want you to be satisfied with every trip you take on RTD. That's what's on the RTD website as our mission.
That's interesting. I think we sourced the mission statement from the last strategic plan. Regardless, if we think—
No, it's not regardless. It matters what we're saying now. If we're going to modify that, let us start from the correct base. Sorry.
No, I think that's fine. I think at the end of the day, are we saying why we do it, or are we saying what we do? And we're having a discussion here about, so what's our why and what's our mission? So as we think about this proposed direction on a mission, thoughts to provide to the leadership team, Mr. Deschel.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree that our history is important, but I think emblematic of the problem is that all 15 of us probably, when asked, give a different mission statement for RTD. So I'm really excited to engage in this. But to directly answer the question and maintain the process, I would invite the general manager and senior leadership team to reflect on other ways in which the mission might be interpreted and sort of the effects of that. We make lives better is a really high bar, and I would love to meet and exceed that. But I think there are ways in which we might get away from that. That could just be interpreted. I think there are ways to maybe have it be a little more related to. Well, that's not the point. The what. So yeah, I guess staying with it is really other ways it could be interpreted, or why else we do what we do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitmore.
So this might be the inappropriate time or the wrong step, but the old mission statement, I think had reference to today and tomorrow. And in looking at what we're discussing all the time, today's rough, tomorrow is even a bigger challenge, and spending a lot of time thinking about tomorrow, whether it's ridership, technology. Spent a lot of time with the accountability committee, and they're talking a lot about tomorrow. So I just don't want that to be missing somewhere in our top 2 or 3 messages. So take it for what it's worth. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we contemplate the vision and propose direction on vision would, I think, invite you to think about that future direction as well. So,
That's probably the appropriate place. Thank you.
Sure. And also, as
Hey, Aaron, I'm sorry. Before you call on Director Tisdale, I would like to just touch base with the board to ask if it would make sense to let TransPro do their presentation first, and then we write our questions down and then ask when it's question time, so that we can hear their whole plan at the beginning. For me, I think that's more helpful. I hope that you guys feel the same way, but Director Tisdale?
I would be more than happy to accede to that direction, Madam Chair. I think that's totally appropriate. I was just going to provide a footnote that if you go to the RTD website and click on who we are, the mission statement pops up and it says our mission, and it's what was read into the record earlier. But I'd be more than happy to have them continue before we get into a whole lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's what I've read on our mission statement too. So Aaron, please.
no worries.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes,
I actually would like to push back on that and push us to, and we selected and hired TransPro, and I think that we really need to view this process with fidelity. They are the experts in that. They presented sort of the scope, and I would really love to push us, instead of focusing on, well, the mission statement actually says this. Well, no, it actually says that. Well, for the record, I'd like to say X, Y, Z. Really focus on engaging in the visioning exercise that's been presented to us by the experts that we went with, as opposed to full presentation questions in the way that we've been operating from before. That said, if I am in the minority of board members, I am happy to accede. I just think if the whole point is to not reimagine, but to move forward and utilize our consultants, let's do that, even if it's uncomfortable and not the way that we're used to working.
Director Duchel, I really thank you for those comments. I guess my feeling is this. I'd like to hear the complete thought of where they're going to first, and so that I can see exactly that I'm not just taking it piece by piece, but can see it holistically and then respond, because the plan isn't for them to spew information and thus to spew back, but to really gather information so that when we do have a question, we have seen the whole piece that they're putting forward, if that makes sense.
Got it. That makes sense.
Great. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, please.
No problem. And I will say we did design this deck to be a little bit iterative. So and interactive. We want to make sure this is a collaborative experience. So we did ask the question, and so appreciate that if you'd rather us drive through, then we can tie back to these questions. I think one of the things in the point around the mission statement is that as we sat around as a team, and even today, right, we've identified two different mission statements this evening. Could our organization, could our people in the organization, would they really know what our mission statement was? And in terms of simplifying and driving towards an outcome that is about making lives better, at least this draft starts to capture the intent and the spirit around how our people think about what their mission is every day, why they get up every day to do what they do. Let's keep moving, Amanda. Similarly, in looking at the vision and how can we start to clearly articulate what we aspire to be and the direction that we're taking on this. So again, showing some sample visions from other places. Amanda, thank you. These are 3 different organizations and their vision statements. Leading the delivery at RTA in Cleveland, leading the delivery of diverse mobility solutions and community connections. CARTA, which is in Toledo, Ohio, a trusted and reliable source of mobility and independence for the community. In Yuma County, Arizona, they want to be recognized as the leader in mobility solutions that empower and connect the community. Things that we see here in all of these examples is thinking about, again, they're aspirational. They want to be recognized as leaders and or trusted. Maybe these are things that they don't necessarily have today or could improve upon. A definition tied to mobility, thinking differently about their role, right? That we can all expect, folks that have been on the board for a long time, folks that are new to the board, recognize the role that RTD plays in regional mobility has evolved even in the time that, even if you're new to the board, has changed, and the expectations around what roles and connections we play to that. In Sacramento, they had a longer vision. They started with the regional district strives to connect people to resources and opportunities while stimulating livable communities and supporting economic development by providing an efficient and fiscally sustainable transit system that attracts and serves riders by offering an appealing transportation choice. They summarized that up as they were thinking about what they really aspire to be. They wanted to be leaders in providing mobility options for our community, that they weren't seen as that yet, and that is what their plan is working towards today. And it's helping them bring their strategic plan and helping it come alive. Amanda? So the vision statement that we were working from the existing standpoint is to deliver regional multimodal transportation services and infrastructure improvements that significantly and continually increase market share. So the aspiration at the time of this one was about growing market share. I think we've heard conversation about that, what that would mean in the context of choice riders and or new markets and new service areas, and focused on infrastructure improvements, which was, I think, a very solid reflection of the era of what RTD has been for the last decade or so. In talking it through and with the CEO and the senior leadership team and thinking about what we're aspiring to do, we have a working draft of a vision statement here as well. And that working vision is to be the trusted leader in mobility, delivering excellence and value to our customers and community. When we were meeting with the team, and frankly, I think we started to hear this in our one-on-one discussions with each of you and thinking about, what do we really need to do to be focused on the direction, the trajectory that we need to be on. Trust came up many times in many different layers. Customer focus and community value emerged many times in many different layers. So we felt like there was really solid alignment between the things we heard from, I think the things that we heard from you all last week in last week's session about recovery, and alignment between where our senior staff is thinking about where we're going, in addition to things that we've heard you articulate on that. Now, Madam Chair, I need clarification here. We do have another question, but we can keep proceeding, but would love to. We'll defer to your leadership on whether or not we ask the question now or wait till the end.
Director Tisdale, did you have a question?
I apologize, my hand is probably still raised. Permit me to lower it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's quite all right. And you know, similar to the mission statement, you know, to want you to think about, you know, how would you reflect on this and things we would want the senior leadership team and CEO to keep in mind with respect to the working vision. So we can answer that question now or answer it at the end as we complete.
I will go. Any questions from the board? I mean, any comments on this piece? Director Davidson.
Thank you, and forgive my setup here. I've changed position a couple times. First of all, I think this is great. I mean, I didn't say anything with mission. When I think of mission, I also think of it being a North Star, and I love the idea of, you know, when asking the question, why are we doing what we're doing? It's asking ourselves, you know, are we making people's lives better or not is an awesome North Star. From a vision standpoint, I really like what we had there. And I wonder if maybe you wouldn't mind just backing up to that slide just to see that statement there. I really like that it has the trust in there, it has customer in there. I totally agree that there's a lot of alignment. One question that comes to mind is, although I really like the trusted leader piece, one thing I might throw out there for consideration of staff and leadership is something that also invokes, you know, the travel of choice, you know, that our customers are getting so much value, and maybe that's already captured in the value and the excellence, but that they continue to return, that they tell others to return. It sounds like we're going to talk about NPS tonight, but I think this is well crafted. I'm not necessarily saying it needs to change. I just would want the spirit, you know, some kind of alignment around more than just trust, that it's also, you know, the preferred option or the choice. Just a consideration for thought. And thank you for the opportunity to comment on that.
Thank you, sir. Director Sloan.
Thank you. I agree with Eric on the visioning. I would like to return to the mission. I think it's terrific that our senior leadership team likes to get out of bed in the morning and do what they do. But I would hope that our final mission statement would also connect to the business that we're in, define what we're in, because we make lives better. Could be a church, an organic farm, a bakery. You know, I think it's great motivation, but I think it's very vague when it's connected with a transit agency.
All right, thank you. Second Vice Chair Cook.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of comments. One, that is a good point. I think Director Deschelle was also sort of getting there, that it maybe if it had just a little bit more specificity or was a little more the kind of thing where you'd see it driving more in the transit arena or more in the mobility arena or something like that, that you might see things that meet that mission, but that really wouldn't be in keeping with what we'd set as vision and aims. So I thought that was a good comment. Regarding the vision, to be a trusted leader in mobility, delivering excellence and value, I thought about the outcomes that we are seeing brought up as desirable. For example, helping to reduce congestion, being the mechanism or the vehicle for these ETRP mode or aims to be met and so forth. That we may not drive that from a vision like this. And then I just had one general thing too. To me, and I come from a, you know, you got to bear with me because I come from a background where I didn't serve on a board per se. I served on a city council, and the electeds there were really helped, rolled up their sleeve, and they got into these parts about the mission and vision and setting some of the strategic goals. That process was led by the city manager and or a facilitator, but it was as much their direction as anything. And then given the give and take, being informed by the professional judgment. Then everybody worked as a team toward the KPIs, et cetera. I mean, I feel like some of that moving in that direction is healthier in my view. Otherwise, what tends to happen is the board is left with an option of endorsing or not what comes up instead of being a participant in the North Star and those kinds of things that really drive those outcomes. So I'm sorry to pontificate a little bit on that, but I just wanted to explain too, part of where I come from. And it's kind of a philosophical difference about the role of the board versus, electeds on a board of directors versus, let's say, a city government. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
If
Thank you. Director Catlin.
may I jump in there real quick before the next?
Yes, please.
That I think that tonight, right, we're going to share some thinking around outcomes, and I think we've got the opportunity to continue to hear your voice. So part of the intent around this interim workshop is to be collaborating with the board as we work through the process, so that we're not showing up in June with a fully baked product, and that those outputs, the measures, the things that you're thinking about, those are going to be the things, it's the metrics and the key performance indicators, the KPIs that tell us whether or not the things we're doing are making progress towards the desired outcome. So continuing to do the work today about making sure we're aligned around the outcome.
Thank you, Aaron.
Madam Chair.
Director Catlin.
Madam Chair, I appreciate Director Davidson's comment about the vision.
Director Catlin, can you get closer to your microphone? I can't hear you.
Is this better? I'm pretty close. Is that better?
Yeah, it is better. Thank you.
I feel like I'm taking up the entire screen. I appreciated Director Davidson's comment on the working vision, and I too really liked that. But then I was about to comment on the mission until Director Sloan captured really my thoughts entirely. I think it's too broad. It intends to be all things to all people, and I think we need to focus more on our business, which is providing mobility choice for our customers and our constituents. That's all I have.
Thank you. Director Bouquet.
Thank you very much. I think just one question we as a board should consider, and then as a staff, would be, what is the difference between our customers and our community? I think that's something that should just kind of be in consideration, because when I think of our customers, I think more of our riders, and how might that vary from our community? I think that might just be something that we consider and think about as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think that's good counsel to give the general manager and the staff too. And so I will say, the way we think about that, the way we frame that, we think about a customer as somebody who is a customer today, right? This is somebody that's using our products and services. Community tends to reflect that non-paying customer, but we know, right? Every one of us knows they're a stakeholder, they're a shareholder. So making sure they embrace and connect their value, and that there's two unique approaches to assessing and understanding priorities and values of both community and customer. There are people that never use our service, but we need them. And we need them to understand the value that we're delivering. We may have a communication challenge in front of us. We may have a policy challenge in front of us. So working to understand what those things are that are important to community, and making sure that we're communicating well, proactively around the things that we're doing well and the impact that we're having.
All right, thank you. Director Deschelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would encourage General Manager and CEO and staff to consider what I don't see in this vision that maybe was there in the mission, is the way in which transit really underlies so many aspects. We sort of went to improving lives to very narrowly focused on mobility. And I don't know, I think the public would benefit from seeing a vision that might tease out a little bit more for what delivering mobility really means. And that might be captured in the excellence and value piece, but it would be great to see that maybe teased out a little bit more. If we're going to continue with improving lives, keeping it broad, I do think transit is a huge underlying equity and connector, pun not intended, but really seeing that teased out a little bit more in our vision, because it might be clear to us here, but I don't know that it's clear outwardly.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Director Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has, I like this vision with the exception of the words delivering excellence. I think excellence is, I would hope, built into everything we do. I don't know how we would deliver that. We're going to bring it there on the end line. So I'm not happy with the words delivering excellence. I like to be the trusted leader in mobility, bringing value to our customers and community. I'm down with all that. That's all that I have at the moment.
Yeah, jump in there. I would say give us 2 hours, and we'll see where we come down on excellence as we kind of work through this.
Okay, Director or Second Vice Chair Cook, I see your hand up. Are you having another question?
No, Madam Chair, I just forgot to get it down. Sorry about that.
Secretary Busick, you're next.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a few comments, I guess, as long as the vision slide is still up. Yeah, I agree with some of Director Williams's comments about delivering excellence. I also think you need the word BY after mobility with whatever you're going to put after mobility. With regard to the mission, I mean, it's kind of hubristic to say we're going to make people's lives better. We might make them easier, but I don't know that we necessarily are going to make people's lives better. I also agree with Director Cook with regard to the process stuff. And as I went into this, the strategic planning process generally, I had the sense that we were going to be more of a partnership with the SLT in developing the outcomes that we're reaching. And it seems like it's the SLT saying, here's what we think should happen. And as Director Cook indicated, you might get caught in a situation where you're either going to endorse or not endorse, or you're gonna work from that as the base instead of maybe something completely different had you worked together to create the base to work on. So I guess I'm a little confused and concerned about how the process has been going. And I also agree with the Director Sloan with regard to the mission statement, in that it is too generic as it stands right now. Thanks.
Thank you. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thank you. I'll start with the vision also, since it's up. And I think that, I think this is a good start. I think to be the trusted leader is an important piece. I think one of the others that you put up there said trusted and reliable leader. I think that would be helpful as well. But I think that that is a statement out to the world that that's where we want to be, is trusted. I also am a little surprised at the process. My experience in the past is that the boards I've been on were more involved with creating the mission and vision, and seems like doing it together would make some sense. I would agree with Marjorie and others that defining "we make lives better" a little more specifically, or thinking through exactly, if that's the right terminology, may make some sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other board members? I'm not seeing any other hands up. Give it a minute. I would just say that reading the mission statement, the operative word for me is "the," because it says to be the trusted leader in mobility. And I'm wondering if it shouldn't be to be the trusted leader in transit connecting lives, so that, or something around that, so it's more transit is very prevalent in it, but I understand the reason for mobility in the whole TDM. So Aaron, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Yeah, no, and that's, thank you for that, counsel. Obviously, General Manager, CEO Johnson is listening in, and these are, great points to take into account. I think that one of the things that we see with high-performing organizations is the trust in the staff and the professionals that they've hired to deliver them guidance and ideas and insights about that direction and trajectory. But I think today is a great engagement in getting this feedback early so that we can see an evolution in these thoughts and ideas, and as we continue to frame them in the planning process going forward. We had penciled in a break for after this section, and we're running about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. So we're gonna, if everybody's comfortable with that, keep moving forward and move into our next section. We're going to talk about outcomes and activities. And Mark is going to take it away.
Super, thanks very much. And appreciate, the comments. I think to the point of this being iterative, it has been working very much with the professionals led by the general manager, which you've selected. And at this point, very wet paint, right? Very wet paint for you to be able to provide feedback to that management team and council as they're beginning to think about truly what should the why of the organization be. It was an interesting discussion as we kicked off in regards to the mission statement of RTD that was adopted in your last strategic plan, and the mission statement which you have, which is on your website. And it shows the criticality of ensuring that your why comes alive, that we're able to see it, feel it, and know it. And the fact that there was one in the strategic plan and a different one on the website speaks to how we actually cause those why statements to come alive, to live. That's how a strategic plan goes from something that we adopt and it goes onto a shelf to actually making sure that it becomes part of the way we do business and the way that we operate and function as a team. And so the way that we move now to the key of that is really working to develop what we call the what, the success outcomes. And to the discussion that the board is having, this is that critical part of the why the board adopting and feeling comfortable about the purpose, as Simon Sinek speaks to it, that inner being as to why we do something, and the articulation of precisely what success looks like. There was a bit of a discussion around excellence in our vision statement. At this point of identifying our success outcomes, we need to define what excellence looks like. We have to articulate, stake in the ground, complete clarity, what success looks like here. So the comment that you see, the question on the slide, is how do we clearly define in the short term, this coming year, what we must deliver in order to realize that broader vision? What's the milestone that we will look at, not on a project basis, but on a performance basis in the pursuit of that broader vision? Amanda, if you would. So as we begin to think about this, don't read the slide because there's far too many words here. It's not designed for you to read the words. It gets across the point of ensuring that your general manager and the professionals that she has engaged are doing the right work to produce the outcomes which the board and the general manager have aligned upon. So often we describe, if we're active, we call it eating tomato soup with a fork, right? There's a lot of work going on, but we're not getting any soup into our belly. And so the key here is, how do we make sure that the management team is doing the right work to produce the outcomes which the board has adopted in pursuit of our vision? Once we've articulated our why, our vision, the success outcomes establish precisely with clear articulation what the outcomes are the board expects to see produced. And now the general manager develops the work program, the how to cause that to be. Go ahead, Amanda. Part of that is working to align performance reviews. One of the key responsibilities of a board is to identify with the general manager what success looks like, and then actually manage the CEO's performance review tied to the realization of those outcomes. And that way the CEO has the ability to be successful. As we often say, it's impossible for a CEO to be successful if we haven't identified what success looks like. And so it's the clearness of that clarity, and this speaks to the end of this process will be to actually tie the outcomes to your CEO's performance review. There's clarity over what success looks like. We'll define what excellence means. Amanda. So I wanted to start with setting up the distinction between activities, outcomes, and success outcomes. So Amanda, if you can begin to share for us, let's begin to think about an activity, particularly of a transit organization. An activity, a work tactic, is the purchase of electric buses. That's an activity. It's an action. The outcome that's associated with the purchase of electric buses is reduced greenhouse gas emissions. The board should be focused on the outcome, right? Thinking about the outcome that we care about is improved climate. The activity to produce that outcome might be to purchase electric buses. That will be led by the management team, right? They develop the activity. The board aligns around the outcome. Now, the last step in this, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, doesn't necessarily mean much. Who determines what that might mean? So the success outcome in pursuit of this outcome would be that the carbon footprint would be reduced by 2.5% by the end of the year 2022. There's only one way to define that, right? You can't define that outcome in multiple ways. That the carbon footprint would be reduced by 2.5% on December 31st of 2022. And there would be an information system and a definition which supports all of that. But it's the recognition that the board focuses on the outcome while the management team focuses on how to go about making that outcome be real. Let me give you another example. If you think about engaging with customers, that is an activity led by the management team to think about how do we engage with the people that are using our system. The outcome which the board might care about would be improved levels of customer satisfaction. The board had a robust discussion last week when you were talking about recovery of what does that mean? How do we think about the data sources and the like? Now, improved levels of customer satisfaction can be defined in multiple ways. So the success outcome might be that we would achieve a net promoter score of 32% by the end of the year. I'm not going to go into a lesson of what net promoter score is because the purpose of this is not to make it an NPS lesson. We can do that later if you choose, but it's more to think about the differences between activities, outcomes, and success outcomes, the clarity of what success looks like. So often we'll watch board members and even CEOs in some cases work to pursue on-time performance. We have to improve our on-time performance. On-time performance is a KPI. The outcome that we care about is a higher level of customer satisfaction. If we were 100% on time with our vehicles, but ridership fell by 15% and our net promoter score dropped by 20%, we achieved the KPI, but we missed the outcome. And the goal is to produce the higher outcome. We care about happier customers. That's the goal. The success outcome tells us that the NPS puts a stake in the ground, net promoter score 32% by the end of the year. Absolute clarity over what the success outcome is that we're looking to achieve in pursuit of our vision. Now, I want to be clear with the board. These are not real success outcomes for RTD. This is purely an academic slide. It's purely to get the theory across between the difference of activities left to the executive team and the general manager versus outcomes and success outcomes. Specifically, what does success look like in the pursuit of our vision? Amanda. So critical to this conversation, Madam Chair, is really taking the board through the very difficult process of deciding where you want to be best in class. Let's recognize that there are lots of choices to think about as you think about a very complex organization like RTD and thinking about the true outcomes that you want to produce. Let me give you a couple of examples, Amanda, if you might. If you think about an organization that has made the choice to be amazing at quality, incredible customer experience, but they're less concerned with price. They're committed to quality first, price second. Amanda, if you will. Ritz-Carlton might come to mind, right? Where they are committed to having a high quality customer experience, and they'll charge you a crazy amount of money to be able to stay there. It's the recognition that quality first, price second. That's the way they strategically have defined success. Think about an organization that makes the opposite choice, where they are consumed with price and they're willing to trade quality in order to deliver upon price. You may be thinking of different examples. Walmart is the one that I'm going to give to you, but you could pick a McDonald's would be a good choice to think about here as well. Now, here's the part I would invite, Madam Chair, the board to reflect upon. We would argue that Ritz-Carlton and Walmart are the same organization. They just made strategic priorities in a different way. Ritz-Carlton is committed to making sure that the quality of the experience is the most important component, whereas Walmart has made the strategic priority that price is the most important. The key to this point is the slide that you see in front of you. You can literally have anything you want from RTD. You just can't have everything. The CEO and the management team can't deliver 5 outcomes to you all weighted in the same way. It's the recognition that we have to pick and choose. And the key for your general manager to be successful is for the board to articulate to the discussion that we're having, this is the outcomes that we expect you to produce at the end of the year, success outcomes, and we will prioritize them for you before the year begins so that you can execute against that. The CEO, the general manager can deliver you any of these outcomes. They just can't deliver all of them. It's the clarity of really prioritizing against where you want to be best in class. So I want to play a clip for you here, and you'll all recognize this clip from President Kennedy. You've heard it hundreds of times. But what I would invite you to listen carefully for, I just think this is brilliant public sector strategic planning, is how the president articulates a vision and then clearly demonstrates we are going to act with urgency and purpose on a short-term basis to deliver this larger vision. We're going to use our actions and our budget to produce this outcome, and then listen to how the president defines success. There is only one way to define success the way the president does it. Amanda.
But the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Now, I would invite all of us as professionals, as we move to beginning to share success outcomes, for your full collaboration and feedback. That's the purpose, is to engage your thinking around this. I would urge you to think about the way the president so clearly articulated what success looks like. There is only one way to identify the way he said this: man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. And we're going to use our time and our budget to produce that. So when we talk, you could see in the theoretical slide I was sharing about success outcomes, it's that outcome, that clarity of the outcome versus the actions to produce it. The president didn't talk about how he was going to order rockets from here or whether it should be this kind of thruster. That's for the folks at NASA to sort out. That's what he engages those professionals for. The president is clear on the outcome that he expects and the success of that outcome. Man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. Next slide, Amanda, if you would. The key to this, and you're certainly experiencing this as an organization today, is if we don't define what success looks like, everybody else gets to. Reporters, elected officials, auditors, public employees, everyone else gets to define success as they choose to if we haven't. And I'll finish with where I started, which is if your general manager is to be successful, she has to know what success looks like. Not wavy, squishy language, clear articulation in a prioritized way, Ritz-Carlton, Walmart-like, of what success looks like in the pursuit of your vision. And the purpose of this session, Amanda, if you'd go to the next slide for me, the purpose of this session is really to engage from the board that feedback for the general manager and her management team of the clarity of these success outcomes, the clarity of organizational vision. I shared with you the 4 circles at the beginning. The why and the what are clearly board territory. We're simply putting something in front of you to very much engage your feedback. Is this directionally right? And to offer thoughts in that regard. There's a quote in front of you from Steve Jobs, which is so key here. It's recognizing that we don't want to be chasing activities. It's having that clarity of outcomes and allowing the professionals that you've engaged to build the work plan to realize that. So with that, Aaron, I'm going to just share one more example here from, this happens to be from Cleveland, seems to be Cleveland night, where their board aligned with their management team around 4 outcomes. One related to customers, one related to the community, one related to money, and finally one in regards to employees, the workforce. And you can see as you move across the slide that we've established the outcome, which we're focused on. So for customer, it's the Net Promoter Score. There's an information system. Where does the data flow from to answer that outcome? And finally, we've defined success. So in Cleveland, they didn't have a net promoter score 6 months ago. So they are going to establish a baseline, and the CEO is held accountable to improving it by 5% over that baseline. There's a clear definition of what success looks like. In this community, they have prioritized that as the number one outcome, which the board wants to see. They are most focused to the point of quality, price, quality. Customer satisfaction is the most important outcome in this community. You all may land on a different answer. You may think about it in a different way. The key is articulating to the general manager what that prioritization looks like as she spends time there. There's another example, Amanda, you can move. This happens to be from Kansas City. You get the idea, though, of clearly articulating the outcomes and prioritizing against those. So with that, Aaron, I will throw back to you to really begin to pull the board in thinking about these strategic cornerstones of RTD's success.
All right, board members, questions, comments? Director Davidson, please.
Sorry, it looks like we're moving forward. Thank you. That was great. My question was, is this the time that we're going to be discussing those success outcomes? But see in the next slide, I think we're moving to that next. So I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
If we were in Funny Farm, we would say, cue the deer, indeed.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, take us to the next slide here. So there's this question about, where do we want to be excellent? What are the cornerstones of success? We gathered as a team, and the we on this is a transpro, the we on this one, and really thinking about the conversations that we've had with you all to date, and listening to the conversation that was had last Tuesday. And there were many points shared. So this is our interpretation of thinking about, what have we heard? Again, what do we hear the board say in terms of success, and what are some outcomes and the direction that we were hearing? And we're really encouraged, because on the next slide, I think you're going to see some alignment. We've broken them down into 7 themes that we're really excited about. We heard meeting people where they are, that being our community, that being our customers, as a value and intent of things that we would like to be doing as an organization connected to success in the region. Listening to the voice of the customer. We start to think about, all right, if we're going to deliver excellence, certainly we want to define that. Our customers are the ones who get to tell us what's important to them. So listening to the voice of the customer, and then starting to build metrics and outcomes around. So if we're going to have, say, a customer-focused outcome, hearing that voice, defining the metrics that align with our customer priorities. Maybe on-time performance is the most important thing, but it might be vehicle cleanliness. It might be safety. It's making sure we hear that and prioritize those things in the decisions that we make. So clearly, by listening, we understand our customer priorities and values. And then developing strategies that are meeting those things. Again, summarizing thoughts that we heard from you all last week. Developing our value proposition for general taxpayers and community. Really heard you all focused on that community value, what we communicate. Now, some of that may be tied to some of the immediate attention that we have with respect to various committees and observations. But again, hearing you all articulate that as guidance, and then also developing a leadership role in regional mobility. And maybe we need to put a finer point on mobility. I think certainly we can discover that. And then defining what recovery success looks like. Is recovery just about ridership? I think that when we hear you all talk about the things that we do, the value we deliver to the Denver region and all of its participating communities, we hear so much more. And I think we understand there's so much more that we do. So there's recovery about getting back to a certain level of understanding, a certain level of perception about the recovery that we're driving. So these are some high-level themes that we're interpreting from our conversations and listening to you. And so, as Mark, I like Mark's analogy, wet paint, to think about how these things align with success outcomes. I want to move into, I see Director Deschelle's hand there, but I want to, if you grant me a moment here, I want to move into looking at some potential success outcomes that both align with these things and also where the CEO and the leadership team are thinking about some things. So the first success outcome that we hear, and I think aligns with things that we've heard from you all in our dialogue, is around community value. So establishing some measure of the perception related to the value we provide the Denver region. And it could be a combination of things. So Mark talked about defining what success looks like. And I think it was, forgive me, one of the directors had for us a thought about, so, you know, what does that mean? What does excellence mean? So going through a process to understand what value means and understanding those things. So it might be about access. It might be about environment. It might be about economic impact. It might be all of those things. And that making sure then that we put in place in the course of the year, establish a baseline so that we can grow and define the target of where we want to be, thinking about a man to the moon safely and back by the end of the decade. And using a tool such as a community value survey or something like that. Amanda, let's show the next one. So customer excellence. Again, who gets to determine what an excellent customer experience is? We would argue that it's the customer, meeting our customers where they are, listening to and recognizing their priorities and values. If we learn that on-time performance and bus cleanliness are job one and job two to providing customer excellence, then our how and our who, right? Our teams are going to be focusing on things that contribute to on-time performance and or bus and vehicle cleanliness. Thinking also about how our community, our customers would recommend their willingness to ride RTD to other people in the community. So that can become a measure of excellence. Again, we can talk about what the Net Promoter Score is, but that is a tool that helps us understand how much people value the service that we're delivering and would be willing to share it with others. The activity in the coming year would be to establish that baseline and then increase it, and using something like a customer survey as a component of that. And one of the things that we want to make sure we talk about is, so this discussion here in the next few minutes is going to be around that, you know, alignment of these high area success outcomes. There's another step, which we're doing right now. So we obviously haven't finished this. We haven't built this yet, but that the key performance indicators, and there are metrics, there's a combination of other things that we will measure in addition to these things. What we're saying is these success outcomes are our four most important things. At the highest level, this is how we define success. But that we build an organizational performance scorecard and perhaps department scorecards that track other metrics that are contributing to organizational success. I will pause on the Net Promoter Score just because we've talked about it a handful of times, and it really measures your customer's willingness to recommend your service. So if any of you have ever taken the survey that says, you know, you would recommend the experience you just had with this customer service representative. If you give it a 10 or a 9, you are promoting the service. If you give it a 1 through a 5, you're actually a detractor of the service if you rate that. If you're 6, 7, and 8, you're passive. You kind of don't have an opinion on the quality of service. The Net Promoter Score measures the percentage of your promoters less your percentage of your detractors. And what it gives you is a measure of your customers' excellence. It was developed by the Harvard Business School many years ago, and it's been used in many different industries. It is used inside of transit and allows us to give us some peer benchmarking against high-performing agencies around the country, as well as, if you're so inclined, compare yourself to other industries. I'm going to put Mark on the spot. He's memorized our various Net Promoter Scores. Mark, give us some example here. Highest Net Promoter Scores. What does that mean, and who might some of those brands folks might recognize, be associated with?
I've been using NPS for 20 years. I think it's just an amazing outcome-based model. So if you are Apple, Disney, Costco, or you ready for this? The public train system in Charlotte, North Carolina, your NPS is in the 70s. People love you. If you are the average transit system, your NPS is 29. If you are a cable company or a cell phone business, your NPS is red. You actually have more detractors than you do promoters. And so the beautiful part of NPS is it is success outcome for a board to manage your general manager. It is an outcome. It is the explanation of your customers saying, I value this. I'm a 9 or a 10, or I'm a 0 to 6. On-time performance, as Aaron is suggesting, on-time performance is a KPI. It is a reflection of the work that the management team did. But what the board cares about is the outcome of that work. Being on time 100% of the time is not the goal. Happier customers is the goal, and the NPS captures that. The difference between outcomes and KPIs is a reflection of the work that they did to produce the outcome. The board looks at the KPIs on a quarterly basis to see, is the management team positioning the organization to produce the outcomes which we aligned on up at the beginning of the year? So long explanation to NPS, Aaron, but that sets up the distinction between outcomes and KPIs. KPIs track the work to position you to produce the outcome.
Madam Chair, we have just 2 more outcomes to lay on the table, and then we're starting to see some hands raised, and I think that'd be a great time for some discussion, obviously, around this. So a third outcome that we start to think about is our employees, and how is their ownership of their role in achieving organizational success. This is actually something we could measure. We could measure with an employee net promoter score. We could measure with an employee satisfaction. But it's this idea that the employee owns this mission, that they own their vision, that they understand, if they're up at the 3rd shift and they're doing preventative maintenance, what that means to customer excellence and or providing community value. And again, establishing a baseline that's that. And then last but not least, a success definition around financial success. So what does it mean to be financially successful? And this is truly a work in progress at this point. Different agencies have different standards and measures for that. Is it that we spend less than we receive? Is that financial success? Is it that we generate revenue from new and different sources beyond the ones that we have? Is it about the community's perception that we are good stewards of the resources that we have, or our employees see value in the investments that we're making? Or is it a composite of some things? And there are places where we could potentially build an index. The key here would be to establish that target and, again, continue to be focused on those outcomes. So let's pause here, see some hands talking about, and thoughts to think about. What are the things we'd want to have be keeping in mind as we continue to evaluate opportunities for success outcomes? What questions do you have around these outcomes? And is there an outcome that is in your mind that deserves some consideration? So I'll stop and we're open to questions.
Secretary Busick.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I see the measurement tool used in all of these to have a component of a survey, whether it's employees, customers, communities. the data you receive is only as good as the survey, and I've not been impressed with surveys that RTD has commissioned. So that I see that as a problem. Thank you.
We counsel organizations to achieve, statistically significant sampling, and that sometimes involves survey professionals and making sure that we're really working to get representation of the entire network. So even sometimes when we're doing a customer survey, we want to make sure we get a representative sample of every bus route, every rail line, our paratransit customers, and getting that full mix. Incredibly important point. And there are information systems that don't exist today that we're going to need to build. And there are information systems that maybe we have today, Director, that are going to need to be enhanced and improved from a qualitative standpoint. Really strong point, and we absolutely agree with that.
Thank you. Director Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my comment and question was along the same lines as Director Busick. And it's only as good as your survey instrument. You can have a push survey, a pull survey, there are all kinds of them. But I was just wondering what margin of error do you have in some of your surveys that you've experienced? And I'm going to use myself as an example, which is probably not a very good one. But when I see these rating on a scale of 1 to 10, which are NPS ratings, sometimes I do not respond, especially if it might be inclined to be on the negative side. So I was just wondering what your experience is on the measure of accuracy.
If I could jump in on that, Director, appreciate the question. I think to the point that I might invite the board to think about, if we truly are passionate as a service business about delivering customer excellence, and if, I'm not suggesting the board would, but if the board were to align with the general manager on regards to using the Net Promoter Score to track whether we're delivering customer excellence, I would invite the board to really use the how that the general manager and her team would develop the appropriate way to articulate that outcome. The statistic validity, the ability to do it in a professional fashion, turn the how over to those professional executives while the board aligns around, is this truly the outcome that we care about? Talking to our customers in a statistically representative way to deliver the Net Promoter Score. Is that the outcome that we care about? And then we'll engage the professional team to figure out how to go about doing that.
Okay, thank you. Director Rosenthal, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for being late. I thought this was at 5:30, but nevertheless, I'm not one to reinvent the wheel. So I really kind of liked what Cleveland did, and I'm actually seeing a lot of overlap between the outcomes that are on this slide and also what Cleveland is doing. And I thought, if they're already putting a lot of thought into the types of activities and information systems and measurables, how do we measure the success outcomes, then I think we should kind of maybe combine what we come up with and what kind of they come up with, and see if we can kind of do a hybrid version. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I think this is great sort of for the short and maybe even the medium term. What I would like to see more is sort of a long-term thinking, is how do we also create outcomes for long-term, kind of like what was brought up earlier about, climate change and how do we impact that issue. But also, as RTD, grows and transforms and takes on new ways of doing business and takes on new technologies, I guess I'd like to see that impacted in these as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Aaron, and your entire team for working on this.
Thank you, Director Rosenthal. Director Davidson, you're next.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I love NPS. It's great. It gives you a good understanding of how your customers feel. But sometimes it's very useful to kind of see what's the tail, what's the dog, right? I mean, you want NPS to go up because of some reason. It's good to have your customers excited, but say in a business, you'd be looking to ultimately sell more product. I mean, Apple's looking to get people promoting their products, putting stickers on their car, so forth, so that more people buy Apple products. And so I kind of asked the question here, and I think it's a question a little bit for TransPro in terms of your experience, but also something for the board to consider. Does it make sense for us to have two sides of this? Let's say we do pick NPS. Is there a ridership number we're looking at? And let me just throw out an example here. Ridership can be very broad, very big, but top of mind for me with what we went through with COVID, we had some areas, activity centers come to mind, or certain regions where ridership did not decline quite as much. And a question going through my mind is, take a hospital, for example. What's the net promoter score of riding RTD to the hospital? How many nurses, how many patients, how many doctors go to that hospital using RTD? Is there a way for us to increase NPS at activity centers? And to make sure that actually mattered in terms of the organization, what happens from a ridership? So I guess I'm just sort of asking the question, and Mark, I'm glad to see you nodding because I don't think I'm wording this particularly well, not feeling my best here. But I am kind of curious, what's the tail, what's the dog? How do we measure, why we went after NPS? Does it make sense to have NPS and some other outcome to make sure that they're correlating and working together, kind of like revenue in a business?
So it's
in a for-profit business, I should say.
Yeah. So first of all, just fantastic to see you on tonight. It just has put a smile, I think, on all of our faces. So wonderful to have you with us.
Thanks.
So a really smart question, and we just led a panel with APTA yesterday on this discussion about value and volume, right? How do you think about that question? And as you know, historically, transit agencies have either invited or allowed, or maybe both, to have success identified purely based upon volume. Ridership goes up, somehow we did well. Ridership goes down, somehow we did poorly, neither of which is true. So I do think the question you're asking is the right one, and I do think the board will need to grapple with this of what is the outcome that you care about? Is it volume? Is it quality? There's not a right answer, but there does need to be an answer. To the point that you're making, which I think we'll get to the issue that you're raising, while the outcome could be, I'm not suggesting will be, but could be the quality of the experience, say net promoter score, I would fully expect that one of the KPIs that we would track in customer excellence would be volume. I would expect that we would have a KPI regarding on-time performance, because my guess, I want to prove this to be true, but my guess is that your customer is going to rate on-time performance as the single most important metric for them to have a higher NPS. Now, we'll be able to prove that in a statistically valid way, that truly is the number one metric. But if it is, I would expect on-time performance would show up again as a KPI, not as the outcome. Boards care about outcomes. CEOs care about KPIs because the KPIs produce the outcome. Hopefully I got to the corner of the question you were asking there.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry if I may, I know we got a couple hands up, but so it sounds like, so if we go after quality, NPS would be something that we would look at, but there might be KPIs that fall out of, is it on time, et cetera, et cetera. And then to your point, a question that we need to grapple with as a board, and certainly one that I've, heard come up is it volume? Is it quality? If it's quality, what does that mean? If it's volume, is it volume across the board, or is it, something in particular? Yeah, that's helpful. I'll yield the floor to my colleagues. Did I capture that answer correctly, Mark?
You sure did, and I'll try to put a finer point on it. So we've been working with the Charlotte transit system. I shared their rail NPS earlier for maybe 6 years now, 6 or 7 years. And their outcome is NPS. That's what they care about. They are committed to being the industry leader in regards to Net Promoter Score. That's the outcome which their board focuses on. One of the KPIs within their customer excellence strategy is volume. It's ridership. How many people do they move? But they have weighted that to the point of prioritization. Volume is only 3% of how the agency defines success. Now, you can argue it should be 13, 33. So you can, like, we can have a debate over the priority of what volume should be. But to the point of the question you're asking, I feel relatively confident that volume will show up in our performance scorecard. It's just a question of how much of a priority would we put around it. And is it truly the outcome that you care about, or is it one of the KPIs to produce the outcome?
There's
Thank you.
A process point that I'd love to make here, and that once we have, after tonight's conversation, some clarity directionally right around the alignment of success outcomes, we'll begin to build a draft organizational performance scorecard that both represents these outcomes, but also some of those sub KPIs that you all have just been talking about.
All right, thank you. Second Vice Chair Cook, you're next.
I was thinking Kate Williams, Director Williams was up first.
Oh, I actually saw you first, but Director Williams, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So just to make sure I understand, is establishing these baselines against which we then set goals for improvement or change. Are you suggesting those are that's the outcome, as it were, for the first year, is just getting a handle on where we are? Just looking at the time frame. That's my first question.
Well, we definitely want to establish baselines. We would definitely counsel you all to go ahead and move as quickly as possible once we've got alignment around these into doing a voice of customer analysis. I'd say the best practice we see through some really high performing organizations is quarterly assessment of these baselines. And that really gives us real time, if you will, feedback into an understanding of, are the things we're doing really demonstrating progress towards the outcomes we desire, and allowing for you all to ask thoughtful questions about, what are the things we need to be doing at a policy level, at a board level, to continue to support progress towards organizational success. So we would encourage and challenge getting those baselines established. It's not the only activity around those things, but making sure that, yes, fundamentally, let's get them measured and let's start tracking and get our rhythm towards tracking and make sure we're measuring the right things. The reality is we're going to start with what we think are the right measurements and measuring what matters in terms of these KPIs, but we might learn over the course of the year that maybe we need to tweak or refine, which is a common thing, and you see in an update to your annual performance plan in the following year.
Okay, I agree with Paul Rosenthal. Not that we have to come up with a moonshot right now as our measure, our outcome, but I think we need to go beyond. I think we need to set a North Star of some kind now that these things support. Maybe we go beyond. In addition to establishing levels of satisfaction by doing these surveys, we also identify other outcomes that are more, substantive. I don't know the right word. I don't want to, whatever it might be. And one of those, I believe, honestly has to relate to the ridership and how we do it. In fact, I don't know that I see it as either volume or quality. It seems to me that if you have that if you set as an outcome the idea of volume or greater ridership, then one way to reach that is by assuring that your quality is there, that you really are doing the kinds of things that your customers want and need in the manner that they appreciate and will rely on. So I guess I don't see them as opposed. I see one as helping the other one. And given where we are, given the expectations in the region, in my community that I have, I think we have to focus on that piece. And it's always what the news will cite about RTD services. We've made these investments, ridership's declined. So whether that's fair or not, it is just the metric that people measure our impact by. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it also informs for us as we think about, say, the communications team and the work plan that they put together. Are they focused on communicating maybe some of these gaps and these stories that aren't being told around some of these other value metrics? And one of the other things when you were talking that made me think about is that these are a little bit in tension with each other, right? So if we increase ridership and now we have a 10% market share of ridership, but we bankrupted the organization in the process, I don't know that we would celebrate that as success, right? We want to be successful in all of these categories as we work together. I think Ms. Williams' arm is getting tired. It's been up.
Yeah, I'm about to call on her. Director Williams, you're next.
I'm fine. I'm enjoying the conversation. I have a couple quickies. I'd like to reflect again on Director Busick's comment that we have not been successful using surveys in history. So if you all are going to go down that path, then we need to make some serious changes. And one of the things I'd like to suggest is that we don't need to survey our riders. We need to survey people who are not riding. That's what we need to look at. Why are they not riding? What would make them ride? Those kinds of questions. We have a famous quote from our previous CFO who said, and I use it frequently, sorry everybody who's heard it before, that on March 1st, last year we had 364,000 riders. And on March 31st, we had 144,000 riders. This is pandemic related. And a year later, we still have those same 144,000 riders. So we waste our time surveying those people. And I think that is what we have done with what little response we have had. So when I talked with you all in my one-on-one, the word that I used a lot, I'm sure you guys remember, was perception. And I am thrilled to hear that NPS is a measure of perception. It's not necessarily a measure of anything real. KPIs are a measure of something real. NPS is a measure of perception. And if there's anything I can do to help us go there, I'm in. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Director Slum.
Right, this is a wonderful conversation. I'd like to focus, if I may, on community value, because that is essential to RTD right now. We need support to make people's lives better. We need partners to make people's lives better. We need just a favorable perception in our region in order to accomplish what we need to do. So I think that is a critical outcome. I'm not sure how there could be a survey to determine that. If you're going to go around and talk to the governor and the CDOT head and all the stakeholders, elected officials, and staff. But I think this one is really important, and it needs work. I don't know if there already is something called a community value index that you anticipate using, because that would be really helpful for our conversation.
Yeah, there are indices in their organization to organization. So community value here is going to be a combination of things, right? Our non-riding public, right? That factors into it. I think community value here is about things we can measure. Maybe it's economic impact, maybe it's our carbon footprint. Those things can factor into community value. We have some partner agencies. They've defined it very specifically around there's a social mobility index and initiative that they have in place. They've wrapped it around, the idea of If our service didn't exist, could that child get to the library to study, or would they be able to get the safe food? So there are some indexes that we've used and have seen some of our other partners use that we want to explore as some of those metrics that build those index. So the answer is yes. And they're based around what we define, kind of way back to earlier in the presentation. What do we define excellence and success to be? Let's measure those things and demonstrate progress towards it. And I think thinking about our stakeholders in that, the takeaway from me is to be mindful and challenge ourselves as we start to think about the things we can measure. How do we do that? What does that look like? And I don't have the answer tonight, but I love the challenge of thinking about it, because we have stakeholders all over the place in different shapes, forms, and ways. So that's a good one for us to chew on, for sure.
Thank you. All right, Director Catlin, you're next.
Thank you for allowing me to have a second bite at the apple. As I look at this, and I agree with Director Sloan, the community value is rather broad and encompassing. And a couple of things that came to mind, we always tout safety being a core value, and it seems to me that that could be folded into that rather nicely. But the one, and Aaron, I appreciate your explanation about that. So the one thing that I'm just going to remind my other fellow board members about, we have one board member who's not here tonight, and her primary focus would be on equity, and how we all perceive equity or define equity is very different. But I would just suggest that that probably will be part of ensuing discussions, and maybe think about how that folds into the conversation. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around some of these pieces, and some of these success outcomes, community value. Certainly, it needs to be quantified. And in some way, I join others in thinking that surveys may not be they may be a piece of the answer, but they may not be the highest and best answer. And certainly, as Director Williams says, it needs to include our non-riding population, people who don't ride our buses and trains. And I think, as a couple of people have suggested, we can get into details about ridership versus quality versus coverage, and various things in a normal time. But, right now, ridership seems to me like it has to be a big part of our goal. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you. Secretary Busick.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'll have to chime in again also with regard to my support of Director Williams's comments. And she's been saying this for years, by the way. We need to survey people that aren't riding. And why aren't they riding? We've also got 60% of our ridership that's gone. Where'd they go? Why aren't they riding? We can make assumptions. Some may be correct. Oh, they're all working from home. Really, 60% of them? I doubt that. Just hit I-25 at rush hour. It's pre-pandemic rush hour. So yeah, I agree with Director Williams. Let's survey not only the customer, because that gives you a skewed result. Here's somebody using RTD, probably going to be generally happy with RTD. They got a bus, they got a train, they take it every day. They're going to give you high scores. So that kind of skews the result. Let's hear from the people that say, I would never ride RTD and why. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Director Williams, I saw your hand up and now it's down. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, it took me a long time to get it down. I put it by accident. Now it's down again. I'll shut up.
Thank you so much. Director Broom, you're next, sir. You need to unmute, Bob.
I guess the things that I haven't heard us talk about tonight is, how do we get the schools open? How do we get the convention center open? How do we get the DCPA and the sports venues open? Those are the things that attract the workers that ride our services to downtown Denver. And not only that, even companies should be encouraged to bring their employees back to work as opposed to working from home. They're going to find out sooner or later that working from home is okay for a short period of time, but in the long run, it's just not going to be feasible. And you can see some of the major corporations around the country that are saying we're bringing our people back to the office, and those are all very successful businesses that are saying that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Deschel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. And thank you, everyone else who has contributed comments. I definitely echo a lot of the sentiments that were made, including about surveys, who we survey, how we survey them. But want to really focus in on the equity piece and sort of trying to ground myself in what Director Catlin raised, and making sure that that is a part of, is sort of a through line for a success outcome. And I think, we talk a lot about ridership. We talk a lot about these other measures. And I think that there is a middle ground here between these surveys and those more objective measures, in that, if you have a high net promoter score, you should, in theory, have high increased ridership as well. If you have high community value, you should be having increased ridership or increased perception. So I'm really trying to think through that. And the other part is, are the success outcomes, what's on the far left, are the sort of how temporal are they? And is it the activity that changes year over year, or is it the success outcome that changes? Because it seems like we transitioned from sort of vision and mission, which you sort of leave alone for 5, 10 longer terms, to these different success outcomes, and knowing that we're an elected board, how much and how quickly those could shift every 2 years.
Mark, you want to take it?
Yeah, really thoughtful question. I think very well said. Let me say a couple things for you to think on based upon the comment that you raised. The success outcomes are typically, and we would recommend, brought to you on an annual basis to have exactly this discussion, this robust debate about how do we think about that. The second part of your question, which is equally insightful, is let's reasonably assume that we establish during the course of the coming year that your net promoter score is a 38. Based upon us now having really insightful data and the right prioritization of KPIs which drive a net promoter score, you're probably going to ask the general manager to get better, right? If we're able to run 3 miles, let's try to run 3.2. Let's try to get a little bit better next year. And I think to the comment about distinguishing between operational performance and community impression, both of which matter in a public service organization, will set far better goals, far better informed goals a year from now in articulation of those outcomes than we can today. You can see on the slide in front of you, like the director referenced for Cleveland, this year we have to build baselines to much of this. We don't have the information systems in place. But as we begin to create those baselines, my expectation is the board will ask the general manager to steepen the curve and really push the treadmill a little bit farther as you go forward. But you'll do so based on fact rather than intuition. Really good question.
And Mark, or Madam Chair, if I may, I have another question.
Go ahead.
The other question is on employee ownership, which I think is really valuable. And this question is sort of, what does it do to the culture of an organization where we might prioritize community value ahead of employee ownership? Right, at the end of the day, we are going to assign scores to all these, and I have a feeling it's not going to be 25, 25, and 25. And so while I firmly believe employee ownership and employee retention is really important, I'm also really cognizant of the fact that that might not be our number one priority. And sort of in your guys' experience, or in you all's experience, what does that do to the culture when employee ownership is not first, or is something related to employee is not sort of at that top level?
Yeah, a second good question. So from personal experience, when I was a transit CEO 15 years ago and went through this process for the very first time, I had exactly that same discussion that you raised of, geez, my agency was in very severe financial trouble, so we were prioritizing our financial performance in an extremely high way. And our management team and board grappled with, how will our employees respond to being a lesser priority to that? We work with about 15 management teams and boards every year through a similar process like this, from the Bostons and the Austins of the world to agencies all across the country. And I think to every single room, they have that very same appropriate question. And the employees fully recognize that by definition, as being one of the top 4 or 5 areas of focus, they're a huge priority. And with clean articulation from the board and its CEO and general manager to demonstrate, by definition, you're one of the 4 key priorities, that it does take money to make sure we have a workforce, that it does take happy customers to make sure that we have a well-performing workforce, that it does take the community valuing what we do to have employees. So with good articulation, employees can overwhelmingly get how they think about that priority. Great question, and one that we will have 15 times this year because boards and management teams ask it with frequency.
Does that answer all your questions, Director Duchel?
That does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I showed Director Davidson next, but Director Davidson, I'd like to call on Director Tisdale because he's not had a chance at the apple yet. Do you mind?
Please, go ahead.
Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Several thoughts and observations, perhaps not questions. Number one, as Mark mentioned yesterday in the APTA Board Talk Live for the Transit Board Members Committee, we talked about the ridership metric, and an observation I made at that time is relevant here, and that is, no matter what we may think and no matter what goal we may have or set for ourselves, ridership remains the crutch of our overseers. When in doubt, they look at numbers. How many people are riding? So that becomes an obvious part of the evaluation process of us that to some extent leads to their assessment of community value. And I don't hear Mark or Aaron saying that we don't count ridership, but that we need to understand it in a broader context. But I think we just need to remember that no matter what, our overseers absolutely rely upon that number, their crutch, to see whether we are successful or not. Secondly, concerning surveys, I don't want to bash our staff as badly as others do, but I will note, in agreement with some of the other directors, that companies like United Airlines, you can never get off a plane without, within 24 hours, receiving a customer satisfaction survey from United Airlines. That comes from a third-party vendor. There are a couple of them that are very large in this country that do. Harvard University, United Airlines, Ritz-Carlton Hotels, the rest that do that. So there are third-party vendors who must be doing a pretty good job because these major companies do rely upon those data. So I think we can find someone. There's a cost associated with it, yes, but that's the price you pay for getting good data. To Director Broom's comment about when are things going to open up, that's really going to drive so much of this. I had two thoughts. First, to some extent, we find ourselves understandably and perhaps even necessarily focused on the short term, focused on the pandemic, and not really thinking out to broader terms and broader concepts. But I also have to admit that some of this may be what people like to call the new normal. So we do have to address it. But we had, and was it yesterday or today, that there was the media event that I think Downtown Denver Partnership and Chair Malpieta, you spoke at that event yesterday about this, the whole Denver's Ready campaign, telling people that yes, we are opening up. So there is that communication going out there. So just to address that point. Then finally, the last observation, when you say, well, we need to measure non-riders, that's right. And it goes back to an observation that was made earlier. Somebody said, well, can you tell me what the difference is between customer and community? You just articulated it. That's the difference between customer and community. Customers are riders. We call them customers, but they're riders. The community includes those people, but it also includes the non-riders. So when we say we want to assess community value, we're talking about going and getting information from the non-riders. So I think Mark and Aaron have addressed this. They're thinking about it, they're doing it, but it is important for us in any event to go through the process of articulating all of this so that we too can come to the realization that these issues have been addressed and have been addressed time after time with other agencies, and now we're going through that same process and getting the benefit of their thoughts. I guess there were no questions buried in there. I think they were just observations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Davidson.
Yes, thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Director Bouquet hasn't gotten a bite at this apple yet. So if you'd like to go first, I'd be happy to yield the floor.
Well, he has before, so either one of you.
Okay, I'll go ahead since I've unmuted. So thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I really just a comment. I'd lend my support to this notion that Director Williams brought up and Director Bouquet, Director Busick seconded, and that looking at the non-riders is really interesting. I'm not sure where to put that or where this is going to fit in the success outcomes, but I am very intrigued by, as we do open back up, we have some very popular routes and some routes that have done well. And, rather than try to reinvent, new routes or, drive up ridership everywhere or more coverage, one thing that occurs to me is take something like the Flatiron Flyer, which is very commuter dependent, is a very popular line. I'm sure that if you were to interview, maybe I shouldn't be so sure of this, but if you were to, do a survey of many of those riders, you'd get very good NPS and very good support. But, if you drive along 36, even now during rush hour, you'll see that many, many, many people are not using the Flatiron Flyer. So very intrigued as to why not. And to Director Broom's comment, as things open back up, whether it's DCPA or, any of these types of event centers, there are people similarly who have not been using the service. And I think that there's an opportunity, and I recognizing, I think, Director Tisdale's point's a good one. We don't want to be, mired down by the short term. We will come out of this pandemic. But I do think that there's an immediate opportunity to, those lines that are still running to earn those new riders, people who have never been riding this service before on those existing lines, which will help create the feedback loop to bring back those lines. So really just more of a comment and lending my support to the notion that we need to figure out why people aren't riding, because I do think that there's an opportunity for us in that. So I think we've already discussed a lot of that. I would really encourage seeing something in this strategic plan that comes out around understanding that and capitalizing on the opportunity of some of those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bouquet.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Once again, this is just kind of adding some more weight to it, but what Director Williams and Director Busick and several other directors, including what Director Davis had just said, just totally adding my support to this. And also what Director Tisdale said was, if it comes to outcomes, the way I look at it is ridership increases community value. It increases ultimate financial success. It leads to other goals such as cleaner energy or a cleaner environment with our climate goals. That it just seems like key, and I just wanted to add weight to that. I did want to bring up, I think either what Aaron or Mark brought up was, when we are looking at these outcomes and we are looking at these goals, we don't want to sacrifice what we already have in place and what we're doing well as an agency. For me specifically, this would be equity, and making sure that we aren't sacrificing equity in our community for ridership increase. But for me, I just wanted to add weight that increasing our ridership, that is, for me, what seems like the ultimate outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last speaker. So I will just say thank you to the board members for this amazing conversation. I think it's been great. My only added comment, I agree with what everybody's talking about, surveys and speaking to our non-riders. And I think that the key stakeholder meetings we've been hosting have been good, but we've not had the number of people I would like to see or the questions from them, which I think is very, very interesting. So we do need to look at maybe some other strategies. But in terms of diversity and equity, I just want to say, as I'm reading these working success outcomes, it's interwoven in every single one of these: community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success. It is encompassing to include everyone. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm really kind of excited about in terms of looking at this. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Aaron and Mark. And if you want to have a break, the board's been, as well as you, for over 2 hours sitting down.
Madam Chair, if I had one other comment, I apologize.
Yes.
It was just for, we put scores on these for prioritization. And so for year one, are we just sort of assuming everyone gets 100? Because establishing a baseline, how do you establish the baseline? So is year one just sort of, okay, we did it, we established. How do we increase the rigor for establishing a baseline?
Good question. Aaron?
Yeah,
you're smiling.
Mark and I are over here in violent agreement. No, if we don't have the information that tells us what the baseline is, we will make an educated guess because we want to have a target. We have to work towards some objective around that. Mark, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's this first year, we want to be able to stand the system up. And it's the recognition that in the first year, to the point of your question, we don't know what the baseline should be. We don't have data that tells us what it should be, but we should get it built. And we should, during the course of the first year, with the general manager and her management team focused on the right KPIs to drive the outcome, we should be able to make it better. And so to the point, we would not recommend to the general manager nor to the board that you adopt a net promoter score goal of 35, because we don't know what it is today. But we would recommend, let's get a baseline set and let's make it 5% better during the course of the year. Next year, we'll have 2 data points and we'll be able to put a stake in the ground. We're going to be able to say, all right, I'm making these up, obviously. We were a 28 and we were a 32. The goal is going to be a 35 in 2022. We will make 35 in 2022 because we can do it based off of data at that point. Today, we don't have the value of the data.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, you mentioned.
Sorry, second Vice Chair Cook.
Yeah, just that raised another question. So just to put a point on it, we're not only establishing the baseline this year, we're going to set some concrete targets beyond that. Will that be part of this process or after a quarter, or what's your thinking about that?
So we need the success outcomes that you're looking at are very much in draft form. And so I don't want to get ahead of anyone, here. We're just here to help ask questions and guide a conversation. But I think our reasoned expectation would be that we would put our toe into the sand, our toe into the water, and begin to articulate establishing the baseline and then working to drive some level of performance during the course of the year. So get a baseline built, work to drive it somewhat better. I think recognizing in a very collaborative way between the general manager and the board, we're all trying to build these information systems together. So in the first year, we're going to have relatively new data flowing in, but I think the goal is going to be to see if we can't nudge these things north a little bit.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
All right, thank you. So Aaron and Mark, could you show us what the agenda is right now so we know where we're at? So when we come back, we know how much more work we're going to be doing this evening.
Yeah. We have about 20 minutes probably left. We have a prioritization conversation, talk a little bit about the retreat, and just give you a status update on where we are with things.
So if I could ask, it is now like just right around, what is it, 6:43. If we could come back at, what, should we take like an 8-minute break and come back like 5 minutes before 7?
Yes.
Does that work, everybody? Okay, 5 till 7. We'll see you guys back here.
Thank you. Director Deschelle, I didn't get a chance to tell you, my brother did his undergrad at the University of Michigan. Been to Ann Arbor many, many times.
Go Blue. Director Tisdale is also a fellow alum.
Oh, very good.
Well,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm Michigan undergrad and Michigan law.
That's terrific. My brother did his undergrad there, and I guess I'm Subway alumni. I don't know.
They've got shirts, Michigan brother. It counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was probably there after me.
No, Director Tisdale, you and I overlapped I think your last year was my first year, right?
Something like that, yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, I was undergrad, graduated LS&A in 71, and then graduated law school in 75.
Terrific. It's great. It's a great school.
okay, is everybody back on? We'll give it another minute or so. People are now logging back on. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get going.
Excellent. So let's start here. That was an outstanding conversation, terrific insight. And to make sure, as we've continued to integrate the feedback we received from you in our one-on-ones, as we've observed last week's recovery workshop, here we are in our wet paint phase of the workshop. What we want you to see as content develops, and what you should expect to see is, where's this feedback show up, right? So it's going to show up in refinements to mission and vision. It's going to show up in tightened definitions and clarity in our success outcomes. And you're definitely going to see it in our KPIs. I think that a lot of the feedback and input that we've got is going to really, you're going to see that reflected strongly in our organizational scorecard, which is to be developed. So I'm personally very encouraged by the alignment around the success outcomes with the themes and ideas that we've heard from you all throughout. So we're going to start to land this plane. We're going to stay on success outcomes for another moment. And there is this very easy, very simple, no big deal conversation around prioritization. So if we agree that these are the 4 areas of success to focus on, we do want to have a challenging conversation around prioritization. And so we're building a scorecard and an organizational performance scorecard, right? So we have these 4 areas of success. And then within those 4 areas of success, we have these KPIs, the metrics. We're going to measure what matters that demonstrate our progress towards those goals. And they, this balanced scorecard represents our stock price, if you will, to the community, demonstrating the progress that we're making towards those areas where we've said we want to be excellent, where we've said we want to be great. So this is a sample, but everybody can understand a 100-point score. And there's some more nuance to this, where we will make sure within the scorecard we're identifying owners responsible for those metrics, the milestones, the information systems that allow us to measure those things. We have to make sure, if we're going to measure something, we can actually measure it, and that we have a really solid information system in place. And obviously we've discussed in great detail surveying, for example, as one measure of that. Our financial data, our performance management systems, our maintenance systems, our state of good repair systems, those all feed the information systems that allow us to measure and track our metrics. One more slide, Amanda. We want to prioritize and weight those metrics. So we're building an RTD branded scorecard. This happens at the organizational level, this happens at the department level. Mark, I want to ask you, is there anything you want to add to that before we move in? Next step.
These are the hard discussions between the board and its general manager where you prioritize what excellence looks like at the beginning of the year. And as Aaron suggested, there's great tension, between these of thinking how these various pieces fit together. There's a very famous story from Lima, Peru, where they had outsourced the operation of their transit system. And they told the outsourced vendor that there was only one KPI that mattered, and that was on-time performance. It was the only KPI that mattered. So the transit operator would start the bus at the end of the route exactly at the right time and would drive through the city, hitting all of the time points exactly on time, and delivered perfectly on their KPI of 100% on-time performance. Do you know what they didn't do? Stop and pick people up, because that's not how they were measured. And it's the recognition that there is tension between these KPIs, but the only way the general manager can deliver for you what excellence looks like is if we tell them, right? We have to tell her in prioritized way what success looks like so she can build a work program and a team to deliver those outcomes that you care about.
The tension inside the metrics also helps us make sure that our tactics, our activities are focused on the right thing. Let me give you an example. On-time performance. We've talked about on-time performance. If we ask our customers, is our service on time? They may or may not agree. If we asked our operations systems, we may find that we're actually on time. Right, so it's not uncommon to have, an actual on-time performance of all the operating characteristics of a 92% or something like that, and our perception to be 60% of the time on time. We may not have an operations issue, right? This informs that we may actually have a communications issue to either help our customers understand what does on-time performance mean, and/or are there investments we make that improve the customer's perception of on-time performance. Just using those as an example. Let's talk about prioritization in the context of our success outcomes. So wet paint, draft here, but you see there are numbers on the right side of our table now. And a suggestion of how might we rank these 1 through 4. I wouldn't ask us to get hung up on the exact point values, but to say directionally, thinking about the things we've heard you say, thinking about our conversations, thinking about where our CEO and leadership team are have their mind wrapped around what success looks like. Directionally, how do we feel about community value being a higher priority than, say, financial success? And let me make this one point very, very clear. By virtue of being on this list, it's important. We've already made the hard decision to say these are the most important things, but there are still times and opportunities where an investment decision, a policy decision, a communication decision still would put an alignment between which one of these things do we prioritize most. So what advice would you give the board, or what things would you like sorry, you are the board. What advice would you give the CEO and senior leadership team to think about as we prioritize these and communicate them to our customers, community, stakeholders?
Is that a question for us?
I'm sorry, yes, and that is a question for you all if you want to answer it.
Anybody have any? Oh, here we go. Director Deschel.
Madam Chair, you can always count on me to fill
Yes, I can. Thank you.
I think when considering strategic areas and focus and improvement, for me, it's really important to look at the data in the aggregate, but also disaggregated data. So if we talked about on-time performance, for 92% on time, that's great, but it's possible that one of our routes is actually 50% on time, but it's weighed out by everything else. but because of the way of how large our district is and the way that our customers interact with our district, taking an average of the entire district may not actually be that useful because of how transit works and the way that people move. So if our on-time performance or our community value is awful in one district or one section and it's great in another, and on average it shows as great, to me, we're actually not doing that great, right? It's about, and I don't know if this is a part of that process, but almost setting a floor of, I want to increase our average by X and make sure no one's below Y. Just considering that, given how broad and vast our population and geographic space is.
All right, thank you. Director Williams.
I'm always slow at the unmute. So I just have a function question. Are we going to end up putting goal points in here that need to add up to 100, or what is the criteria for doing this exercise?
Yeah, we want to have a balanced scorecard, and so yes, we want to have these things add up to 100 in total.
Thank you. That's all I had at the moment. I'll go back to digesting.
All right, thank you so very much. Next, I have Director Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I misunderstood, but I don't know if the board has settled on these 4 success outcomes as its success outcomes yet. I kind of thought that these were more of an exercise for discussion purposes and not necessarily our particular success outcomes, because I think that we still have to work through some of those. That being said, there are some external factors at work here. We have this accountability committee that is feeling pretty empowered to advise RTD on what they want to do. And they have 3 subcommittees, and as you all know, they have a governance subcommittee, they have a financial subcommittee, and they have an operations subcommittee. And particularly with regard to the financial success, at this point in time, we simply do not have enough money to fulfill the needs. So I would suggest that we need to have something that measures financial success in maybe setting priorities for expenditures, discussing operations versus capital. I mean, just those are tactics that the staff needs to decide, but I think that we might have some of these values or success outcomes imposed upon us in the ensuing months. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, I think that's critically important. Your point about the financial parameters being a limiting factor of what we can do. So being, again, clear around what success looks like and what is important, and acknowledging what we can do within the resources that we have allows us to make thoughtful decisions about the investments and projects that we take on. Yeah, terrific point.
All right, thank you. Before I go to Director Tisdale, I guess there is a question on are these the 4 areas that we're working from, or is the board going to be able to identify the goals or the success outcomes?
My thought to that, my reaction to that, and the way we set the stage going into the last conversation was to, say, here's what we're hearing you identify as priorities. Here's the conversation that the CEO and the leadership team have had and how they're framing it. So directionally, are these the right 4? If there are others, or opinions about those others, we'd love to know what they are. And did we miss that? I felt like the robustness of the dialogue that happened not too long ago was giving us confidence that we were directionally right. But
no, I thank you, Erin. I just want to make sure that we're being transparent and that people understand that. So we'll go down that road in a minute. Director Tisdale, you're next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. yes, I understood that basically the outline of success outcomes was created by Mark and Aaron and other staff based upon all of the conversations they'd had with us. So they tried to avoid having us have to go through all of that sausage making as a group, but rather in the first instance began with eliciting from us what do we see as outcomes, then going through the crucible of the SLT to get their view. And I think that goes back to an earlier comment made by Secretary Busick that I'd like to come back to concerning the notion that, well, shouldn't we be more engaged in this? Isn't this more of a participatory thing? Why are we just hearing what SLT says? And I don't think that's a fair characterization. I think that SLT was presented with what we had individually provided to these folks. And based upon that, they distilled it, discussed it with SLT, and came back to us for a first go. I mean, you have to begin with something. And so that's what I understood it to be. My question, though, the reason that I raised my hand relates to the scorecard now, because I do have some reluctance in applying specific scores to these things tonight at what, 7:10 p.m. On Cinco de Mayo to say, and yes, I have not been celebrating Cinco de Mayo yet. I'm hoping this will be over soon so that I can. But in any event, the notion is that this is to give us ideas and we can talk about general parameters, but I kind of thought that the scorecard would be something that with precision we would establish at the strategic planning retreat itself. So that is in the form of a question.
Yeah, and we're thinking for this conversation, right? We've taken a stab at prioritizing these 1 through 4. So with a higher point value estimated for community value, again, let's not focus on the points, but in terms of directionally ranking these as what would be more important in comparison to the others. You know, I feel like listening to last week's conversation, the analysis of our interviews with you all, community value and a demonstration of improving our perception in the community is, we didn't really hear anything that was contrary to that being our most important thing. That's what we're trying to reflect here and confirm that we're headed in the right direction with them.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, second Vice Chair Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first I wanted to just echo pretty much everything that Peggy Catlin said. One, you know, I am not sure that I heard in that discussion that we are all on board with these 4 values. I heard quite a bit of discussion of ridership. Some people talking about it as just a recovery, but there are so many good outcomes that relate to ridership. More cars off the road, less congestion, a better financial base. I honestly think that at least focusing on the recovery aspect of that, it needs to be in here. And on financial, I'm a little worried about that being slightly de-emphasized because, as mentioned, we were heading to a spot where we would not be able to maintain our system. And I don't know whether or not we've been able to change the trajectory of that with the financial aid, but it certainly was key, and making sure that the state of good repair is funded at the 70% plus level, making sure that on an ongoing basis we aren't overspending what we can reliably see come in, all that sort of thing. So I guess I agree with not yet doing this, but I would say as one early point of change, I would emphasize that financial stability a little bit more and really hone in on some pieces of that would relate more strongly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
I guess my first question is if Director Tisdale was right in terms of how these were created. Did you take our feedback to the SLT and then they created these?
Yeah, and also then, so we've had workshops with them both concurrently while we were listening to you, and also then follow up with them after last Tuesday's session. So definitely sharing the feedback and insights that you've all been providing. And they have obviously their own personal awareness of priorities based on their experience with you.
And are there some that you considered and threw out? What were number 5 and 6?
It's funny that if you go back to that slide of those kind of 7 themes that we summarized, we felt like these 4 really captured it.
Okay, well, I guess with the first one, community value, maybe value is the right word. I think of trust as where we need to be going, that we need to be rebuilding trust. I think that some of the things mentioned under definition in all of these are, I think it's pretty good. I think that those could be refined a bit. And I share Director Cook's concern that we're not really in a great position to devalue financial success. I would probably right now keep community value or community trust at the top, because I feel like so much else comes from that perceptions of on-time performance, as you were saying, and perceptions of our contributions to the environment, and a lot of different things, our financial success, do come from our status in the community right now. So I would probably keep that first. Whether the other 3, I get a little harder time with those, but it does seem like it would be difficult to devalue financial success in our situation right now. And maybe these encompass, sort of the short term and the long term. Although I think in your 7 pieces, you had recovery as a separate item. But I think whatever we do with these, it needs to be in the short term focused on our recovery. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Deschel.
Thank you. 2 comments. One, I first want to appreciate the work that Aaron and their team have put in, and do want to encourage us to sort of move forward with these, keeping in mind that they've solicited broad feedback. And candidly, I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone on this board, but I don't think we could actually come up with 4 priorities that we all agreed on. And so I want to really rely on our consultants for that. And with financial success, I go back and forth on wanting to emphasize it, but also recognizing the natural tension that it has with community value. We have 2 choices. We can increase revenue and we can cut costs. And we don't really have the authority to increase revenue through taxes, so we might be able to get it through fares. As far as cutting costs go, our biggest cost is our debt service, and we can't default on our debt, which means our second biggest cost is employees and staffing and salary, and just making sure that we're all, should we want to elevate financial success, that we're all prepared for that reality.
Thank you. Director Williams.
I just, following up on Director Deschel, which I have been known to do, I want to point out that we have to look a little differently. There is no financially profitable transportation company. It just doesn't happen. Transportation is subsidized all the way down the line in any form. So our outlook on financial success, as Director Deschel was pointing out, has to, of necessity, have a different viewpoint, which I don't believe, just me, not saying anything, that we are going out of business anytime in the near future, RTD. We may shift and change. So I am inclined to put financial success further down the line. Not that it's not something that we don't need to pay attention to, as we are elected public officials and have an obligation to the taxpayers. But it's not something I think that we want to prioritize beyond one of the four. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else's hand in the queue, so let me just say thank you again for this robust discussion. I have to say that I absolutely agree with Director Tisdale and Deschelle that we hired an expert consultant to come in and help us look at things from a different perspective. That's what we've asked to do since we were voted in 2018 and started in 2019, at least, you know, in our group. I also believe in our general manager looking at things from a different lens, that giving her the opportunity to, with her SLT, look at what is attainable in light of what we are dealing with as an agency and as a community together, and giving it a shot outside. I actually think that community value and customer excellence and employee ownership and financial success all come together for the good of the agency in the whole. And I think I'm actually quite excited about trying this model to see how we move forward and making sure that we are attaining the goals that we need to do. Because as we all know, we are in the crux of a lot of different entities meeting about us and talking about us and deciding things that we should be doing. And this is our opportunity to really bring it together for us as elected board members that represent our 3 million constituents to say, we're going to do this, and this is how the measurement's going to be. And you know what, if it doesn't work, then we can revise it. But for now, I think this is a great starting point for us to work from. And I agree with Director Tisdale. You know, it's a good jumping off point to work from. So with that, Aaron, I'm going to turn it back over to you and Mark.
All right, very good. Look, it's a challenging conversation. This is a challenging conversation every time we get here. And, you know, once we narrow down the things that we want to be great at, now we have to pick our favorite child. But it's incredibly important to know what those most important things are, because it helps us make great decisions, helps us make better decisions. So terrific dialogue. Let's keep moving. Amanda, we're about to land this plane. I think we have had that conversation. Sorry, it was the same slide. It was the question that we had asked you. Sorry for the quick click there. Last thing we want to make sure we get ourselves prepared for, we do have a board retreat in front of us. And as we mentioned, we'll have ongoing engagement as we start to pull drafts together, fine tune the language and tighten things up. So I think we've gotten tremendous clarity and alignment around the major components of the front end of things. Amanda, take us forward here. So just want to make sure we are collaborating with you to define the right agenda. Obviously, we were going to do a good deep dive. No one should be surprised by the time we get to our retreat, which will be in June, around what the components of the strategic plan are, and talking about alignment with the board's oversight of the strategic plan, focus on the outcomes, and connection to the appraisal of our CEO. We see those as the three fundamental components of the retreat. And invite you to provide us feedback around, are there other things we may want to accomplish beyond the focus on those three things? How do we help make sure that we're preparing ourselves and you for a productive moment? You know, you all have many meetings. When we get together for a retreat workshop, we want to make sure we're driving really great outcomes for you all, and each meeting has success in terms of accomplishing that. And Mark, any other stage setting regarding this topic that I've missed?
No, I mean, it's the whole point of how do you connect your success outcomes that cascade from your strategic plan directly into the oversight, the performance review of the general manager. It's how you make your strategic plan come alive. Strategic plan, success outcomes, performance review of your chief executive. It's how you make it all happen.
Okay. Comment, Director Williams.
Hi, sorry. So are we going to do this in person or are we going to do it remotely? That's part one of the question.
Not my question to answer. Would love to see you all in person. How's that?
Madam Chair, if I may address that question, recognizing where we are with COVID and considering we would bring together the senior leadership team and this would be a public session. As I stated before, in relationship to our facilities, we do not feel comfortable in we can't accommodate that vast amount of people in consideration of where we are with the data pertaining to COVID. Unfortunately, right? It would be great if we could be in person.
That's okay. I'm fine. I just was looking at step number 3 there, and I was going to bring my streamers and balloons and hats and horns to step number 3, but I can do that online. Thanks.
All right. Director Deschelle.
Couldn't help myself. I apologize. Do we have a date for the June retreat? Did I miss that somewhere?
No.
It's entirely possible that I did, but
Well,
June is soon.
If I may, it was contingent upon this, and I was going to confer with Ms. McManus as we identify. So no, that hasn't been established as of yet. And then more so, and I'm sorry just to hijack, I was off camera, wanted you guys to talk, but as it relates to like the CEO appraisal process, TransPro will be engaging at the GMOC and there'll be steps. And as we figure out some questions tomorrow, we can come back and then identify a time in June. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss an important date in my calendar.
Oh, absolutely. We will make sure you don't miss it. All right. Any other comments or questions from anybody? All right. I'll turn it back over to you, Aaron.
So we'll just take you through a couple of the next steps, what to expect. There was a name mentioned a moment ago, and I regret not acknowledging her and her team at the beginning of the meeting. Ms. McManus, just a terrific job in terms of coordinating you all. I'm sure you have an appreciation for what she does, and she's really been a terrific asset in helping us pull together coordination with you folks for the collaboration we've been able to have. So do want to thank her and the whole team for the work that they've done to get us here and work that they'll do for the next couple engagements going forward. So as I mentioned at the beginning, go all the way back to the beginning, where we are today in terms of some of the ongoing work with the departments and how we're feeling around alignment of the direction, starting dialogue with the department at the department level now, getting the department heads and their leadership teams thinking about this direction of mission and vision, and what is the work plan that they put forward that is going to help them deliver? How do they deliver the outcomes that we desire? So what's the work product? And we kind of have we frame it as a start, stop, continue. Are there things we need to start doing immediately that will contribute to organizational success? Are there things we should stop doing that do not contribute to organizational success? What are the things we need to continue to do? And then advance the slide, please, Amanda, thinking about the metrics as well. So what are the departmental KPIs that measure the progress and determine, are the things we're doing making progress towards the outcomes we say we want to accomplish? So starting to build those data points as well as we start to frame scorecards and components of the work plan that become the strategic plan. One of the things I'll say about the tactics that while we spend so much time, right, focusing on what success looks like and making the definitions right and working through, a prioritization conversation and then defining key performance indicators that build up the measures of organizational success and department success, but the tactic level is really important as well, right? This is the place where we're saying, okay, so now we know what success looks like. Let's organize the work we do to achieve that definition of success. This then also means the resources we need. Can you all hear me? My screen just froze.
Yes.
Thank you. So do we have those things in place, and so start to build future budgets around making sure that we're funding the things that we want to do to accomplish those outcomes. Amanda, what's the next slide, please? I can't see it because I'm frozen. Timeline. So as you can see, this is where we are in process. We are here. It is Cinco de Mayo, as Director Tisdale so thoughtfully pointed out. And the work we'll continue to do includes ongoing engagement with the board as we start to refine and put finer points around these, working with the department heads and starting to craft our tactics that really have our owners defined, clear milestones. This is the thing that really actionalizes the strategic plan and makes sure that we're focused on delivering the things that we say we're going to do. So that was the point I wanted to make about the tactics before I distracted myself. And on target to complete this by June with a wrap with you all at the board retreat and the CEO performance appraisal. I apologize, I'm not looking at the slide. Mark or Amanda, anything we need to add to that?
Well said. I think you landed the plane.
I believe the next slide says one word close. Do I have that right?
Yes.
All right. So the one word close, and Madam Chair, I'll ask you to facilitate this one by calling on participants. But we like to wrap a meeting like this. We've thought a lot of things. We've collaborated. We've done a lot of hard work. But the one word close helps us articulate best as you can in one word. What are you thinking? What are you feeling as of this moment? And so would love for you all to go around and share your one word as we close this portion of your meeting tonight.
All right, I will call on each board member, but Ms. McManus, did you have something before we do that?
I just wanted to ask if the board office could have a copy of the presentation to distribute to the board members. That was a particular request.
Yes, no, I asked that question and our general manager has said that she will be providing that. So
Thank you.
All right, our one word close. Director Bouquet, you are the first.
Oh, exciting. I am optimistic.
Great. Director Broom.
Dinner time.
I'm sorry. Dinner time? Okay. Secretary Busick.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
no comment.
Director Catlin.
Cautious optimism. That's 2 words.
Okay. Second Vice Chair Cook.
Glad.
I'm sorry?
Glad.
Glad.
Like glad.
GLAD. Okay, great. Director Davidson.
Onward.
Director Deschelle.
Energized.
First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Excited.
Director Rosenthal.
Thoughtful.
Director Sloan.
Appreciation.
Director Tisdale.
Promising.
Director Whitmore.
Contemplative.
Director Williams.
Ah,
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
arriba. Arriba.
Oh, I know what arriba means.
I thought you would.
Mine is collaborative.
Holy cow, the sprinklers just came on in my front yard for the first time. Yay!
So Mark and Aaron, I want to just say thank you. This has been really an extraordinary conversation for the board to participate in. I know that I learned a lot. I'm looking forward to having the slides, and I hope that if we have a meeting, the next meeting we have, that we can get the slide deck maybe before, so that we have a chance to look at it and digest it. I think that would be helpful, but I would just like to say thank you so very much. And it is, ladies and gentlemen, 7:32 p.m. and I'm adjourning this workshop. So have a wonderful evening.